Welcome back. I don't know if you've been here before or not. This is Ben number 2 here to welcome you to the 4th episode of the Ben, and Blue podcast. It is 10:21 California time. 2 hours later, 21 minutes after noon, cornfields, and an hour later than that on the East Coast of the United States. There's many more time zones in the world that I won't get to. That doesn't matter to you because this is a podcast, so I don't know what time it'll be for you. But I've always wanted to host a radio show, so that gives me the ability to announce the time at the beginning of the broadcast. Anyways, that's on brand with what today's going to be, which is random. And so I thought Grant previewed this beautifully at the beginning of the 3rd episode, where we talk about Grant and Ben create videos. Are those traditional lectures? Are they... what's going on there with that kind of disconnect of us not liking traditional lectures and them making videos. And after we recorded that podcast, we kind of felt like it was a little panel-y. Maybe we were taking ourselves too seriously or something. There was characteristics of just when Grant, Ben, and I have conversations that we liked that weren't coming out in the podcast. And so in order to try to combat that and experiment with it and see what would happen, we hit record again immediately after that recording. And we just talked about whatever came to mind. That turns out to be a variety of things, from getting things done and personal productivity to goals to improv to, I think, my grandma comes up. The fact that Ben's a pilot comes up. A variety of things come up in there. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's a fun conversation. The analogy that came to my mind is growing up, my sister and this girl in the neighborhood would get together and they would choreograph dances. Maybe they're 10 and 11 or something. And they would spend all day being like, all right, what about this move here? What about this move? Oh, that is cool. That is good. They break for mac and cheese, probably. Always an argument about who gets to lick the spoon because it's cheesy and buttery. And then they would keep going. And at some point, they would go to my mom and the neighbor girl, Kathleen's mom, and say, hey, we've got a performance we want to show you. And they would say, okay, why don't we all meet outside at 6 or 6:30? They alert the husbands, tell the brothers they have to be there. And we all go sit out in lawn chairs as Kaylin and Kathleen perform this dance that they've prepared over the day. And in the dance, undoubtedly, they get things wrong and they mess up and they giggle to each other and they say, no, Mom, stop recording. Edit that out. Or, Mom, pretend like you guys didn't see that. I'm going to come back with this other thing. And we all laugh. And they're trying to put on this amazing performance. But what we love about it is seeing Kaylin and Kathleen, like the cuteness of the layered deeper of the performance and of their effort and what they're doing. And maybe there's an analogy there for what we're going for here, which is we were too focused on the performance of, no, we're serious. We have interesting things to say about education. But maybe what's more interesting is peeking a little bit more behind the curtain and just hearing about random things we think about. Maybe we talk a little bit about what it's been like to create the podcast. And so maybe there's an analogy there that holds. At the beginning of episode 3, Grant said that we want feedback on this. That's very much the case. We're still learning and growing and trying to figure out which direction to take this. And so if you can let us know what you like about episode 3, what you like about this episode, we can take those positive characteristics and reflect on those and kind of decide where the podcast is going to go in the future. I think Grant had mentioned that the subreddit is a good place to provide that feedback. That is indeed the case. Also good places are wherever you can find us. If you tweet at us, we'll get it. If you leave YouTube comments, we'll get it. We'll look at all of that, aggregate it, and have a conversation around that. If you put it in your journal, I don't think we'll find it. I don't think you want us finding it there. But anywhere else online that's directed towards us, I promise you, we will look at it. We'll consider it. And so without further ado, let's give you what you came here for. Episode 4, The Random Show.
This is what I didn't expect about podcasting, was that there would be so many technical challenges, because I'm usually fairly competent when it comes to technical things. And surely plugging a microphone in and pressing record and getting a facsimile of the things that I said can't be that complicated.
It's the most basic thing in the world.
You would think so.
No one thing is difficult, and it's not like there's any challenge, but there's just, I don't know, getting the mic set up or all of the little fields that you have to fill out, or it's not like YouTube where there's this centralized entity. Instead, there's a whole bunch of other things. And sure, you can use these syndication services that take care of that for you. But then there's a whole bunch of just little things that add up in a way where you're like, oh boy, I really thought this was going to be record, upload, and say goodbye. But it ends up somehow.
Even YouTube isn't that way, which kind of was surprising to me too. It was man, when I make a new video, there is this half a day process of just getting the thing, just turning the crank on this machine that causes it to exist in the world.
Yeah, especially given that a good part of that half day is like neurotically checking comments and views after the thing has been put out.
Oh, not even after. I mean, I don't know. At that point, I'm done. But just yeah, you got to write the description for it, and it's like, what do you got to come up with a name for the thing, and this is all kind of at the point where it's like you've already done all this work to make the thing.
Mhm.
I don't know. You probably have a name and description figured out before you actually create it. I'm kind of the other way around. I make the video and then it's like, well, I've like made the video. I've done the hard part. I feel like I put in all this effort and created this thing and it's done. I've edited it. And then it's like, now I got to like figure out what to call it. And then I got to upload it. I got to back up the files, the raw video. I back those up somewhere. It takes forever. I got to upload it to YouTube and then that has to process it forever. I got to figure out what to call it. And I got to like link to it from 5 different places. And I don't know.
It's just a lot.
It's surprising.
I have a checklist for this of like when uploading a thing, and I would have thought, oh, there's going to be like 4 items on the checklist, like upload the thing, write a description, post it in places. But it's just a really long checklist. This should be the simplest thing in the world. And
yeah, same with me. I have this giant checklist, and then you add different things because it's like, oh, okay, at this point in the video, I got to add a little card that points to this other video because I mentioned that, and I don't know, just all these.
Shout out to Checklist. Have you guys read Checklist Manifesto?
I've not. This seems like the kind of thing you would have read and read hard, Stenhug.
I mean, I loved it. It was just, it's not a how-to, which maybe I would have read a little bit more, but checklists are so basic that you don't even need the how-to. But he's literally just documenting like the gigantic gain societies benefit from the use of checklists and all the places we're inefficient because we don't use checklists right now. Like, that's a fascinating, hilarious topic.
Sell me on it because I don't know. I feel like I've heard it from a couple people and it's like, yeah, maybe I should read this. I maybe don't do as many checklists as I should or something. But I don't really use checklists for many things unless, I don't know, like uploading is like one of the few. Should you be
using more checklists in life?
Yeah.
Well, he's kind of making it more he's not usually advocating from like a personal productivity standpoint, to my recollection. He's talking about when hospitals instituted checklists, the drastic decreases in accidental deaths that happened, or when construction companies started using checklists, the drastic decrease in like building collapses that happened.
Okay. So.
Yeah, I think the 2 major places that I use checklists are flying airplanes and uploading YouTube videos.
The highest stakes thing. It's hilarious when we decided to make this podcast. You guys had just way more experience in recording things and such. I'd made 9 episodes of like what we called the homie podcast with my buddy when we were traveling, which was just like an excuse to not have to tell the same stories over and over again when we called home. So it's like, listen to the podcast, then we can talk about like substantial stuff instead of me repeating myself over and over again when we were traveling. And we literally did this just like crowded around an iPhone. And so this is literally how I imagined us like producing this. I thought it was like, we'll all get together, we'll put an iPhone on the table, we'll try to all be like somewhat close to it, and then we'll start talking. That is like, I kid you not, that is the conception I had. And then I was like, and right from the phone, you can just go into the share settings and you can share directly to Google Drive and just do a share link to anyone that wants to access it. They can download it if they want.
Maybe we should do that. That seems much better.
That sounds so much easier.
Well, what's funny, I'm just diehard K fan and Minnesota sports guy, and they have people on it, but they're like talking to athletes and people that aren't going to come into the studio. So it's like, oh, we've got Sam Bradford and he's on the way to practice on his cell phone. And you just deal with like the fact that like, oh, Sam, sounds like there's some construction in the background. What's going on? And then Sam like talks about it. That like sometimes just becomes the actual topic of conversation.
Yeah, that gets hard.
We could do a call-in show if we really want technical challenges.
Oh, let's do that.
Ben Sendhog's on the phone this week.
We'll have a car talk themed show where, I don't know, like educators call in or something like that. And we like bumblingly don't really help them, but like try to have fun while answering their question.
Yes. What do you call us for help with?
Like private
what are we
tutors.
Qualified to help?
No. Like we're qualified in a lot of different things, right? So like someone who's getting their private pilot license might like call you, Eater, for advice on like things that are happening.
Yeah, a call-in show seems like a great way to do flight planning. What could possibly go wrong?
Right before the runway. I mean, that would be like a soothing podcast, is if you just walk through the checklist with them. I mean, we have to acknowledge, I think 50% of the use case of any podcast is to just put people to sleep. Like every podcast app you find is going to have the sleep setting. And that's because that's the majority use case, is just voices that might be soothing that let you drift off to sleep. And Eater reading a checklist before you take off.
Yeah, before takeoff checklist.
Yeah.
I kind of want to go grab one and just start reading.
Go grab it right now. I want to hear that.
He's moving.
The checklist that I always get made fun of is my oral hygiene checklist. So if that fails, if Eater's flight checklist fails, my oral hygiene checklist will put people right to sleep.
That would be a good podcast. We just sit here. We do nothing but read through various checklists that are in our lives. You're here. You actually have it. You have it right there on your shelf.
Yeah, we've got the 172 Skyhawk information manual. So we've got a section 4, normal procedures. Pre-flight inspection. Let's do before takeoff. Before starting engine.
Oh God.
Takeoff.
I'm so bored.
Hang on.
I'm like riveted. I'm so bored.
I'm so bored. I'm so bored.
I haven't even started.
There's not like what will this be? I'm kind of waiting for it to end, I guess. But by all means, don't let me interrupt you.
Before takeoff checklist. Passenger seats, most upright position. Seats and seatbelts, checked secure. Cabin doors, closed and locked. Flight controls, free and correct. Flight instruments, checked and set. Fuel quantities, checked. Mixtures, rich.
Keep going.
Fuel selector valve, recheck both. Elevator trims, set for takeoff. Throttled 1800. Magnetos, check. RPM drop, not exceed 150 RPM in either magneto or 50 RPM differential. Suction gauge, check.
All right.
Engine instruments, navigator, check.
Can we call this, Dan? How can we call this?
We're only like halfway through.
Hey, cut. I have a very sincere question related to checklist that I'm excited to ask. That's part two. Part two. We got close. I'm sure like they have snacks in the back. So I've had this desire to do this many times in life. I'm curious if you guys have ever played with it. I think I'm more extreme on the GTD, productivity, this sort of thing than either of you probably is. But I've had the desire to make a checklist for life, like make the 12 things that I want to like live my life out of, and then weekly, monthly, somethingly go through it and just be like, hey, am I living like that? Like 1 would be like, I don't know, like be kind to people. 2 would be like call my grandma. 3 would be like be authentic and vulnerable. 4 would be like not be afraid, something like that. Have you guys ever experimented with something like this? And if so, how would it go? And if not, why not? And what's your take?
That feels so oppressive to me. I couldn't deal with that. It would rule my life.
You'd be too constrained.
I'd feel stressed out about like, oh, am I doing these things I'm supposed to do?
It'd be stressful to like hold yourself to the life you want to live. Like that, there's something that like doesn't quite buy for me.
I wouldn't call that oppressive. I mean, that just feels more honest. We all have these that we don't make explicit. And then every now and then, like after a couple months, you sort of wake up from your dogmatic slumber and you're like, am I being nice to people? Am I doing something meaningful with my life? Am I still on good terms with my family? And like, if all of that's good, you kind of like, okay. And then you go back to your day-to-day routine.
Yeah, but I don't want to run that checklist every day.
I mean, why not?
You don't have to. What if it's monthly?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Answer your question though, Stan, how I haven't even ever considered doing something like that. Partly maybe I'm just not a checklist person. In principle, seems fine, especially if that's the kind of thing that you do anyway. If it won't feel oppressive, I guess, if it doesn't feel like too big a deal and it's all you're doing is making explicit stuff that you think about anyway. I don't know.
So that was like a made up list. I have like multiple of these. We could pick one and I could divulge it. Aside on calling grandma, calling grandma for me has just always, especially now that she's like older and it's just become less interesting to talk to her, while at the same time, like the pressure to talk to her and the stakes kind of feel higher just as she like is kind of experiencing different things in life.
I feel that.
And so I called her today, and like I call her, I have a 15-minute commute to campus, and we played. I've been learning this improv game I'm taking this improv class. You probably took it with the same guy. I forget. Did you take improv with Dan Klein?
Love Dan Klein. Dan Klein's second only to Lisa Rowland.
Second only, and that's Dan Klein's amazing. So I'm spending 3 hours with him every morning. And one game we played, and there was like the word game where I say a word, you repeat it, and then you say a new word, and then I repeat your word and I say a new word. So we can. I say ball. And then now you say a new word.
Wait. Oh, court.
Hillary.
Clinton. Oh, wait, no, I say Hillary. Clinton.
Hillary Clinton. Clinton. Monica. We're doing the association.
I don't think I'm playing this very well.
But and that's the thing. Dan says don't label that judgment. But it was amazing. I usually just talk to my grandma and like listen to like her describe that she's misplaced something or that she's having pains, and like that's like I try to just like listen and try to update her on my life. But today we spent 10 minutes playing this game, and it was like the most fun I've had talking to my grandma in a really long time. Like just
I
listen,
love that.
just listen to my grandma like generate words and like have kind of like a spontaneous connection that we never have together anymore was an amazing experience. So I feel like particularly solid on that because I felt like grandma has been like a to-do list item to check off, and like that's felt guilty even to have it as a to-do list item to check off, and now it felt fun today for the first time. So you hit me in a soft spot.
I feel like you've actually solved a problem that I have calling the grandparents, where you feel like it matters more. And it's hard for the conversation not to just center around health in a way that you don't feel like you're meeting the intent of making a call at all. It's like, you don't want me to call so that you can talk more about health concerns. You want to have a connection with your grandson. It's not
Right.
deeper than that. That's really clever. I'm going to try that. How'd you broach the subject? That feels awkward to me to be like, hey, grandma, here's what we're going to do. Do you just dive in?
She was telling me like the same story about my cousin for like the fourth time, and I probably cut her off. And I was just like, "Hey, we're gonna do this." And she said it was 7:15 my time. It was 9:15 her time. I said, "Grandma, we're gonna play a game." She said, "No, I can't today. I'm going to Rosary Club at 10:30." It was 9:15 in Columbus, Ohio, where she lives. Or no, she's Eastern, so it's 3 hours ahead, but it's something similar. And she had an hour and 15 minutes. I was like, Grandma, no, like it's gonna take like 5 minutes. She's like, I was like, all right, and then you just give the instruction and just like require to do it. And then once you have the momentum, you get going.
That's really clever. I love that. I'm going to do that. I'm 100% going to do that. I feel like more people should. I feel like games in general are kind of underappreciated. More people should just default to playing games, is my view in life, because it's not my tendency. I feel like the older you get, the less natural it is to be like, hey, everyone, what game can we come up with right now? Like if you're doing a car trip that's not with children, the idea of playing Contact in the car or something like that, something almost feels wrong about that, but shouldn't. Car trips are boring as hell, no matter how old you are.
Yeah, we gotta play games more often. It's a better experience to play games than it is to like tell each other about experiences you're having without them and like try to use that as connection. Okay, Eater, I want to ask you a super specific question.
Yeah.
All right, so here's what I do weekly, and tell me how this would make you feel and if it would have positive or negative outcomes on your life, and just hit me with it.
All right.
Okay, so it's Sunday morning. I sit down, and first question is personal integrity reflection : fundamentally, am I being the human being that I want to be? And then it's just a free write on that.
You're actually writing a response.
Literally typing a response into. I'm telling the computer if I'm fundamentally being the human being I want to be, which will be read by likely no one / maybe me in the nursing home when I'm reflecting on my life later.
But you're articulating it more than just like, yeah, last week was not so bad, or nah, last week. You're putting a little bit more like examples of, yes, last week was good because I did this and I did this and I was patient with this person and I gave the benefit of the doubt here. Like you're articulating that sort of thing.
100%. I lied to this person. I avoided this person. I didn't do this. I ate pizza for dinner 5 times out of the week. Oh, like I did call my grandma. I'm proud of that. Like I'm getting very specific.
I like it. I don't do it, but I like it.
What happens if you do it?
I haven't tried.
Like, come on, just give me the thought experiment.
Do it
now.
For the
No, it's a very personal thing. You wouldn't want to.
That's literally the most personal question you could have asked someone, right? Like, hey, are you like the person you'd like to be?
I don't, as a rule, I definitely don't do this. Like I don't reflect. I certainly don't have a checklist that I run every week to reflect on that sort of thing. It probably would help me be a better person if I reflect on that sort of thing.
This falls into a large category of things for me. Stenhouse, you are a certain personality type, and there's copies of this personality type strewn throughout the world of like optimizing their life, right? In some way or another, of being very deliberate about goals and what constitutes productivity in like your work focus or whatever it might be, and just drilling down on that. The feeling it evokes in me is yeah, I should probably do that. And then I don't. There's no disagreement. There's no part of me that says, well, what's fundamentally wrong about that approach is blank. Instead, I agree and then just don't do anything. And this is kind of what I'm feeling here with the checklist. I don't know. There's no reason not to. I don't know if I will. Maybe that's the right thing to do, right? Is we finish recording and I actually enumerate that list.
I think it's a personality thing of like, there's some people who are just kind of drawn to process, and they like process and creating process and following process. And for them, because following a process and living in a process is a very natural and comfortable feeling, then the path to a better life is creating a process that works and iterating on that process and fine-tuning that process. I think there are people who really don't like process and kind of chafe at process. And for them, that sounds like a terrifying idea. I don't know. I almost feel like I can see both sides of that. There are times when I love having a clear process and understanding, this is why I'm doing this and this and this and this, and it is a comfortable feeling. There are also many times where I find that to be very constraining because I feel like that takes away some freedom and flexibility, which, I really value having freedom and flexibility to take in data and just do anything with it. Not necessarily like the next thing on the checklist.
Yeah, I feel like the risk is that there are things that should be optimized in your life, like giving yourself the time to just think about something in a playful, random way for like an hour, or things that actually are valuable, but you would never put on a list and say like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to just like mess around with a notebook for an hour and a half with no clear aim, or like, I want to just poke around on the internet trying to find interesting things. A lot of the good things that end up happening, I wouldn't have thought to articulate the setup to those events.
Yeah.
I get like quickly identified as this person, and then people have kind of one of two reactions just to categorize people. One, it's like, you're insane. I don't want to hear about that. I don't want to be around it. Like, I don't like just like keep me away from that craziness. Like, that's literally
you and your goddamn checklists disgust me. If you can't remember how to keep your teeth clean without a piece of paper on your mirror, I don't want to be around you.
That's literally, and like that stresses me out that you do it. Like, it just stresses me out that like there's a human that exists that does this. And then there's person two, which sounds like maybe describes you a little bit more, Grant, which is like, oh, that seems interesting and is probably valuable. And it's like, I call them like the non-follow througher. It's like oh, cool. It's like the same thing when people tell me I should like eat a certain type of way. I'm like, that would certainly make my life better. And then I just like, don't do it. I don't totally buy your point that like you can't, like you can have structure. Like, so I now sit down with a buddy of mine like at 7:30 every Wednesday morning and like kind of just do a partner reflection. I've never had someone that's followed through consistently on this. And he was kind of expressing the same thing. Kind of what you said was like, man, like I want to do more of my own research and I want like more time to just like climb down the rabbit hole. But like, I feel like I just get like attacked by like other research projects. His solution was just to make like Friday be like for him and the rabbit hole and no expectation on Friday. We talk about each week, like, hey, did you follow through on that? Like, did Friday, like, you just literally, did you not respond to emails from your professor? Did you not do this other thing? It seems like that was pretty beneficial. So I think, like, you can work that spontaneity into the structure in a way that doesn't make them completely disconnected.
I love the idea of doing it with another person.
I don't fall into, I don't know. I guess I feel like I don't necessarily fall into either of those camps in terms of reactions. Like, I don't have that visceral negative reaction.
You're still on the Hangout call.
I'm still here. Yeah. I haven't blocked you. Or anything like that. Yeah, no, I don't have that negative reaction. I look at that and I was like, yes, that is a kind of person. I am not that kind of person, but that's valid. Like some people operate that way and think that way, and that's helpful for them. That's not me. I know that that's not me, but I do know that the goals that you have in terms of like, you want to lead a good life, you want to have time to reflect and to go down the rabbit hole. I want that too. I just get them in a different way. I don't see it as like, your life is lacking something that my life has, or my life is lacking something that your life has. We just have different ways of approaching this and thinking about this. Both of us can get the things that are valuable. It isn't that I'm not going to be able to reflect on a regular basis about my life unless I use a checklist, or you're not going to be able to do anything free or spontaneous without giving up your checklist. Neither of those is true.
Yeah. And the last place I want to come from is like I reflect and you like don't do this weekly. Oh, you must have an unexamined life. Enjoy that one. Yeah, but that is like, I can get there. Like you can extend to kind of this stance and get there. And I'm aware and afraid of that, I think.
Just as I could extend and easily get there to say, well, you have this checklist. Like, how do you ever just have time to just relax and just sort of see where things take you?
Like, Brad, you have fun.
Yeah.
Of course I do. It's baked in there as item number 3 on my weekly.
Yeah, like what are you talking about? It's in like I could show you. It's right
from 10:14 to 10:38. I have fun every day.
Like, look at me, I'm smiling right now. It says smile too. So here's and this is legit. Like, I want to have this view, and then I just see the world as too black and white. It's hard for me to imagine like a weekly reflection for a half hour every Sunday morning where you write about like, hey, am I being the person I want to be? Am I connected to my family? it's hard for me to imagine that having a negative effect. I could see someone arguing it has zero effect. I think I would argue it has a significant positive effect, but it's hard for me to imagine like a weekly reflection like that being negative. And then from that, I want to extend and just be like, everyone should do it. And
Okay.
that's a pretty low bar to tell everyone they should do something, just saying like it has no negative effect, right? Like we could make lots of arguments with that, but like that's where my mind goes.
Yeah. So for me, my reaction to that is that I feel a burden that you clearly don't feel of if I'm saying I'm going to do something at this time every week. To me, that's a burden on my mind of like, okay, now I have to do this thing.
There's your negative.
That's a negative, number one. But number two, like my way of sort of approaching things is like, if I don't really have to do it, I will defer it. And it's very easy for me to say, well, I don't really need to reflect on this now. I'll do it next week, or I'll do it Tuesday or whatever. But then I'll feel bad because like, well, but I know I should have because I told myself. So there's sort of this negative emotion that comes out of that. But if I'm the sort of person, which it sounds like you are, who feels a lot of comfort in that process and feels comfort by knowing like, okay, I know on Sunday morning I'm going to have this time. I'm going to be able to reflect. That's going to be a positive thing. I'm going to get something good out of that. Then I can see that that's positive, even if you miss it because something comes up or whatever. It's still like, well, this is this comfortable thing. I just didn't get to do it. Whereas for me, it's like, here's this thing that it's kind of like a little bit of tension because it's not tension because I don't want to do it, but tension because I am stating that I have to do it. And I don't like that have to do it thing, especially when it's sort of artificial in the sense that I know from experience that there's other ways for me to reflect on my life and hold myself to leading a good life.
Do you have either like deliberate things put in place? I mean, not necessarily as systematic as this, but just ways that you feel comfortable that you will actually be meeting those goals. For me, it's like this background process of like, yeah, I try to like keep that up. I'm never separating myself from the flow to re-examine and say like, hey, am I doing this? Instead, it's just, yeah, I try to keep that in mind when it's reasonable, which I think is suboptimal. I'm definitely falling into that category that's Stenhouse described of people who are like, yeah, that sounds cool, and then don't follow through. Yeah. So are you like background process?
I think, background process with interrupts. I think there are times when something bubbles up and it's like, I feel like, I've really been lacking in this one area. And that just creates a pressure on me. And that pressure will surface with no thought of my own. It's just that pressure sort of surfaces and then it becomes apparent and it becomes this tension. And then that forces me effectively to sort of deal with it or think it through or whatever. I could certainly see the argument that that's ineffective.
Yeah, I think that's what I experienced. And it feels like that's just a less healthy, I don't know, maybe this is a weirdly graphic metaphor, but it's like the difference between a blister that just like bursts versus one that you like purposefully kind of let the fluid out before you continue your hike, so that it's not that there was like a whole bunch of pressure and then just like naturally the thing happened, but instead you minimize the damage that had to happen while letting out what needed to be let out. Tortured metaphor, you know what I'm saying.
So growing up, I'm like a schlub. End of 6th grade, my mom finds like a rotten banana in my backpack. I could not be less organized. I think this is like a pretty common productivity system for students growing up. It's actually surprisingly effective. It's just like after dinner, I just went through my class periods mentally. It was like, first period, do I have anything? I'm good. Second period, oh, I got to do that. Let me do that quick. Third period. And like that was just my productivity system, like literally through college. It gets easier in college because you have fewer courses than in high school. And then I was just a schmuck, man. Like just papers everywhere, didn't care about anything, just chaotic environment. And then I go to teach. Like that could not work worse. Like you just turn into a ball of anxiety because you literally you're trying to now hold like not 7 class periods worth of assignments in your mind. You're trying to hold like 72 different things you have to do, all with like different consequences that you're going to face in the immediate future. Like, hey, did I call that person's dad? Did I fill out their referral slip? Did I like prepare the thing for first period? And then like I read the Bible of this, which is Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity, GTD by David Allen. And I just implement. I just turn my life around. Yeah, literally turn it around. I don't know which way it was facing before and which way it was facing after, but like it was a 100% kind of switch. And David Allen's like number one principle is like your mind's not for remembering. It's for like thinking and creating and having thoughts. Cam, because I sold Cam on this hard. You're like aware of this to some degree. And Cam's quote is, and I love it. He was like, I know my mind's healthy when while I'm peeing, I'm generating ideas, not worrying about something not being done. And I was just like, oh man, he's sold. He's sold. Main man made it. Like, he made it. We're here. Can I get a witness? So, but just to circle all the way back. So the whole idea is to offload off of your conscious to like be able to like enjoy and be present. And that's the theory. And like, if you keep the system up to date and your system's in control, I don't need to worry about, oh, did this thing get done? Because it's in the system. Now I worry about when we offload those things, like being a good person to like reflecting on Sunday morning. It seems like I maybe want to carry that kind of weight around with me. Sometimes it's valuable to make my mind have anxiety about it, because then it leads me to live it a little more. You might think about it more often, like more regularly, Grant, because you're like not trusting your brain to think about it Sunday morning is maybe my point.
I mean, that's just definitely true. It's funny to hear you come down to the land of mortals, because I feel like that's not a good thing. Like, that's not healthy, and you're less productive when there's more background processes happening.
My problem with getting things done was...
So you read it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't need to read the whole thing. In fact, it's really torturous to read the whole thing.
It's torturous.
It's the problem with books, man. Like, you can't make money by writing a very good 7-page article that really encapsulates your point. So you got to drag it out into a book. It's a problem.
So that severely afflicts getting things done. But the good news is that somehow I was able to back myself into getting things done without reading the book. I think what I read was there's like the OmniFocus quick chart about how to implement getting things done using OmniFocus, the program. And if you read, it's like a 2-page PDF or something. And if you read that, it actually describes pretty much everything from getting things done, because it has to, in terms of like telling you how to use it in OmniFocus and how to use OmniFocus. It sounds like I dodged a bullet there. Didn't have to read the book. So highly recommend that. Book is terrible.
Grant, have you read it?
No, I have not.
You got to read it, man.
I don't think I do. After hearing Eater, I've got to read this 2-page PDF is what I got to read.
I think we could spend the next 90 seconds and save you the torture. Well, to be fair, I've picked up the book and I thought, oh, I'm going to read this book. And it was not pleasant.
I read the book and then I listened to all the podcasts too. He started a podcast afterwards.
Gosh. You poor soul. You and I are different people.
Same name, different person.
Wow. So anyway, getting things, basically the idea is like whenever you have any idea in your head, you put it into an inbox, you write it down somewhere, and it's in this inbox, and therefore you no longer have to think about it. It is out of your brain. You don't have to think about it. You know, because you have this process, it will happen when it needs to happen, and you'll be engaged and do it and all the rest. So that's number one, is nothing should be in your mind about like, I have to do this. All of that gets written down immediately. You don't have to organize it immediately, but it gets written down immediately. And then you have some period by which you review this inbox and you review the other sort of projects and tasks in your bucket, and you break tasks down. You might say this task is a larger project, and then it breaks down into these tasks. And then you tag the tasks with different contexts. And so I think the classic example is like you tag some things with the phone context, and you tag some things with the calendar context, or whatever it is. And then what you can do is, because you've tagged it that way, anytime you sit down with your phone and you're like, I need to make some phone calls, you pull up the phone context and all the phone calls you need to make are there. I don't know. The way I try to do it is like break, large task, small task, medium task. And so, at any point in time, I was like, well, I'm kind of my mindset for small tasks. So let me pull up my context. I'd have all of the tasks that are small tasks, and they're all sort of the next thing to be done for any of my projects. I didn't have to think too much about it. I just like look at a task and like, oh, I can do that, and then check it off, and then do the next thing, check it off. But then the key is like once a week or whatever, well, once a day, I think you'd go through your inbox and you sort of like triage these things and add labels to put them in different contexts. And then like once a week, you sort of review all your projects and prioritize things that need to be prioritized, deprioritize things that don't need to be, or break out projects that need to be broken out. You could do all sorts of things like, at least in OmniFocus, you can say defer this, which is like take it away and then like just bring it back to my inbox, in a month. OmniFocus even has like a little button you can press that's like defer this, and it has a little dice on it. It just like defers it for some random amount of time. Just like go away, come back later. Was there anything that I left out that was in the book?
Me and my buddy distilled it to like 5 principles.
So I'll take that as a no.
Pulled up.
So you don't need to read the book.
Well, so no. So no, Eater. What I think you did perfectly was you described how you would implement. I think the way it's implemented is already outdated. We're always connected. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't need a phone context and a computer context. The context thing is pretty outdated, like, already.
So that's why I said, like, I used it. I ended up like making my context like small task, medium task, large task. So it's like if I have a half hour between 2 meetings and I don't really have time to swap in any kind of context, I just like go into OmniFocus and say, just give me my small tasks. And they were all like little things like, oh, just research this or do this or send this email or set up this meeting. They were all small things that didn't require a lot of thinking. But then if I had, a 4-hour block, I'd say, oh, I could do a medium task. And so I'd go into OmniFocus and it would tell me, here's my medium tasks. Or if I had like a whole day where I didn't have any meetings and I was like, okay, I got this whole day. I want to do something meaty. I could get that.
Yeah, that seems like a much better like use of context to me. Like that seems way more sane.
So not only did I give you an overview of this book that you no longer have to read, I've improved upon it. So you're welcome.
Great.
Okay. I've got my 5 like more high level things. You hit this, Eater. Hold tasks in a system instead of your brain. You nailed that. Number 2, I actually find this really valuable. Always have the next action clearly identified and written down. Batch similar tasks. Use your system often enough to trust it so you don't have to rely on your brain. Remember that the ultimate goal is to get to deep focus. Yeah. Super consistent. You described more details than.
So the 2 problems that I had with it, what was the second principle you mentioned?
Always have the next action.
Yeah, always have the next action. So that was one problem for me, was that weekly or that daily review or whatever it was, whatever period it is that you go through your tasks and you like break them out. So you have this like nebulous thing that goes into your inbox. I want to start a new podcast. Like that idea comes to my head. Like, oh, I should start a podcast on aviation. I don't know. I don't actually have any intention to do that. But let's say that idea comes to my head and I'm like, wow, that's a really good idea. I don't want to forget that. So then I put that in my inbox. Start podcast on aviation. Pretty nebulous, lots of things. The part that was challenging for me is then I'd go back to that sort of review where I'm like, okay, now I need to triage my inbox and sort these things. And it comes to like, you need to like identify, well, what is the next action for that? That was always like kind of a struggle for me. I don't want to think what the next action is like right now. I just want to get through my inbox, like get this stuff off my plate and so that I don't have to wade through this system.
If I was doing it, I would make it meta, right? The next action is to think of what the next action should be. And then I don't think about it. That's on the list, is think about what the next action should be for my nebulous aviation podcast.
Create action plan.
Yeah. And then I'm on to the rest of the checklist. Not even thinking about that anymore.
But either I think you're right. I think the general thing is like it's over the curve. It's just like it's over the curve.
So number 1 is that. Number 2 was the other trust your system. Do it often enough so that you trust it. That's where I massively failed, which was I was great at putting stuff into this when I was trying it. I was terrible at getting stuff out of it. So it was just like this black hole for me to forget things that I was supposed to do. And so I never trusted the system. I was always fighting to kind of, or what would happen. I think what would happen is the system would work for me for like a week or 2, but something would come up, like just, I'd get super busy. I'd get super focused. I'd get dragged in this direction, that direction, and just wasn't prepared to like bend the system to deal with the sort of increased stuff I had on my plate, and kind of fell into my old ways in some sense, which felt more comfortable and felt more like fluid. And I was like able to kind of react more quickly to like different things changing. But then I'd like kind of forget all of the things that I intentionally forgot because I put them in the system that I'm now not paying attention to. And so that was like a trap. And I found myself, I gave it a few tries and I found myself like repeatedly ending up in that situation.
I mean, so like me listening to this right now, I'm thinking, okay, I got to at least experiment with this, and I'll like report back to you guys. Sten, how do I not do what Eder just described? What forcing function is there on the follow through?
I'm stuck in that because my life is so ingrained in these systems that my answer is like, oh, you put it in your system, man. But like without that system to put it in, to hold you to it, like, I don't know. Like this is...
It's a bootstrapping issue.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, very, very, very clearly, I think one of the huge problems with GTD is that it describes itself as this like complete life overhaul and this way that you need to structure your entire life and you need to have your whole life in the system in order for it to kind of work. And then your mind can go to this like amazing place where you're just like generating brilliant Nobel Prize winning ideas all the time. And I think the problem with that is like if you look at behavior change, like what you want to do is you want to start really small and change like some small behavior every day, not like make someone completely live their life in a different way starting on Tuesday and it's Monday. I don't know. My suggestion would be to like pick something small and do it. Maybe it's get to inbox 0 at the end of every day. Maybe it's you have an end of the day checklist where you like do a few specific things. I don't know. But I think that's the implementation thing that David Allen misses. You should experiment. When I said you should read the
will.
book, I didn't
No, I'm
mean because
100% serious. I'm
yeah.
not going to read the book. That much I've been convinced of.
But I think you'd find it interesting. Like I think it'd be interesting. I think you'd find it interesting in like a meta way.
I think I'm not going to go with a lecture-based learning method here, and I'm going to do a more active learning thought and just dive into it. Well, which is why I asked, like, is OmniFocus the thing to do? Is that the app that I should go to now? It feels like there's a lot of things like Remember the Milk or like Asana.
OmniFocus has the cult following for sure.
All right, that's the one. I'll do that.
Well, Eater, do you like OmniFocus?
From what I could tell, it is built for getting things done. Like it has all the features that allow you to kind of implement the method as it's supposed to be implemented. That's my understanding. I still use OmniFocus. I don't use it in a getting things done way explicitly, or I kind of do, but I do so recognizing that it's not the single source of truth for me, unfortunately.
What's the prefix, like the Greek prefix that's not omni, but conveys just a partiality? Semi-focus or
semi-focus. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of the problem is I definitely went all in on it. To your point, it wasn't a situation where I did it in part of my life, and that was like I went all in. The problem was that I found that I spent a significant amount of my mental cognition thinking about getting things done, like thinking about the process and like, oh, I need to like put this in my inbox, and then, oh, I need to triage this thing, and I need to like split this into this context or that context, or like, oh, what context am I in right now? What should I be looking at? And like, how do I filter this to see the thing that I should be doing now? There was just like so much mental overhead to just be thinking about this whole system, which I felt like I understood what I was supposed to be doing, but it was like a very cognitively heavy thing to do, which I imagine if you really integrate it as this habit, it becomes not that. It just becomes sort of a background thing that helps you, which I imagine is where you are, Stenhog. It was not a place I was ever able to get, and saw a little indication that I would get there, and if I were there, that I'd be happy with the result.
So you talking about this has led me to make what I think is a fascinating and earth-shattering connection in my mind. So I don't implement GTD fully at all. Everyone that does it started by trying to adhering to his biblical, like, do this, and then they like realized it doesn't work for them in that specific way, and they have like their own method that's probably looser and just like,
yeah,
it goes with their personality and their life a little bit better. Yeah. That's really interesting. And that like your reaction to that is to like blame David Allen and be like, dude, why did you teach me this like super specific method when like this is not a one size fits all problem? Like you're kind of a jerk and an idiot. But maybe there's brilliance in that, because there's tons of people producing like kind of self-help things at the principle level, at the like, oh, you should do this, like manage your time, do this, and this. And like people feel frustrated because it's not like tactical enough. And so maybe this, from a learning perspective, maybe this is the best way to go. Teach something super specific, make someone struggle with that specific implementation, and then like adapt upwards, as opposed to like learning in the clouds and then trying to come up with how the hell you would live that out.
I don't know. I feel like there's probably more people who have been exposed to this GTD dogma and then tried it and like been turned away than there are hardcore adherents. Like the risk of going with the hardcore specific to start approach is that you lose more people. Like those that you keep,
it made him really successful.
You what?
He made millions on the book.
Oh, okay. So wait, what? We've got millions out of billions. That's not convincing me of anything.
Well, and also, I mean, he made millions on the book because he's telling a good story. Like, I love the ideal. Like, you're painting a great picture. Like, you have this amazing life where you don't have to think about anything, and just things come up when they need to, and you're always focused on the most important thing. And I'd love to live that life. And so, sure, I'll buy the book, and if it'll help me live that life. It's not the case that everyone who's bought the book is successfully using it.
Yeah, what I want to know is daily active users of OmniFocus.
Well, I use OmniFocus. I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and the way that I use OmniFocus, it's like, okay, I've got 4 things that are past due. I've got 2 things that are due today. Those are also past due. And so that's my prioritization. So,
but my point is, maybe like you don't get to this point without getting things done. Like, where are you without getting things done? Maybe this was productive to make you like, do you have OmniFocus? Do you think in this way at all? Like, are you in a completely different world?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Like in my case, like I have you guys or whatever have you, or the number of other people have kind of mentioned liking this book.
To be clear, The book is terrible.
Sorry.
The idea,
That's not either.
the idea is great. The book is not the right way to convey it. Too long.
You've made that point abundantly clear. Mentioned liking.
So you, how many copies do you own, Eater? You've got a signed
own
copy?
0 copies. Well, actually, I somehow I got my hands on it. Was I pretty sure I don't have a physical copy? Maybe I pirated a PDF or something.
I think that exists. I've probably gifted 5 copies in my life. I no longer have any, but I've certainly bought at least 5 copies.
Gift.
It's such an aggressive gift, man. I've got 5 fewer friends as a result. Can we do a thought experiment? That's actually, I think, would be really interesting. All right, so it's 1 p.m. You're on your lunch break. I know this may not fit perfectly, but you're driving around, and the oil maintenance light comes on your car. This immediately brings to you like a to-do, which is to go get your oil changed.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I let that fester in the back of my mind, and it makes me less efficient at the work that I'm doing through the following 3 days until that pressure is slowly built up to the point that I like make the phone call or do what I need to do. Here's the thing. I feel like there have been points in my life when I've actually been a lot more organized and it's like felt good. And for that, I've always just used calendars in the way that calendars aren't really supposed to be used, of just like hard blocking when things are done.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, what I would have done is I would have just calendar slotted a time that I will address the oil change issue.
So here's what I would do. Here's what I have done.
Yeah.
I would stop the car. I would switch the odometer thing over to trip A, and then I would shut off the car, and then I would hold in the odometer button, and then start the car again. That resets the oil maintenance light.
I was wondering where you're going with that.
Yeah,
like,
I didn't. I thought this
really
was some
going
great GTD stuff.
Deep into this specific example. That's
And then
super
do you
fun.
And then I would have a little background process that's like, I need to probably change my oil at some point.
I've done something similar because I had like a natural gas car for a while, and you just don't need to change oil as frequently, but the light comes on as frequently anyway. So I just got in the habit of like turning it off just whenever it came on, being like, it doesn't know. This burns clean. This burns clean. And that was fine for several of the cycles, but not all of them.
Yeah, well, and I figure, if I'm using synthetic oil and, the big oil tells you to change it more often than you need to. And so I figure, I reset it, and then there's some amount of guilt that accumulates somewhere in my brain. And the amount of that guilt is proportional to the number of times that I've reset it and done nothing as a result. And at some point, that pressure builds to a point where I'm like, I should change the oil in my car.
Is this where you thought this question would go, Stenhag?
I didn't think we'd get so deep on the context of oil, but I love it.
Well, then the other key point here is I'm in the habit of changing the oil myself, which economically is terribly inefficient because
we're definitely very deep into like the specifics of what was not meant to be.
So
a
I think the
specifics
specifics
question.
matter.
So the specifics do matter to some degree. I think it's interesting. Like the point on your end, Grant, you like kind of make the point, which is like, oh, it's going to fester. I'm going to be unproductive, whatever. What I do is I like at the next like red light, I like type into my remember the milk app, get oil changed. And then when I go through my system at the end of the day, I put on my calendar for like whenever the most convenient time is to like get the oil changed. And then hopefully I follow through on that. If I don't, I'll reschedule. Now, you guys are feeling kind of like some small amount of pressure. I feel like, oh crap, I didn't get the oil change whenever I see it in my system and I like haven't done it yet. Compare those two things. The most efficient thing I think is like go pull into the nearest like Valvoline and like get it taken care of. Don't encounter any of this like guilt. Don't encounter any of this like fixed cost of putting into a system, and just like get your done oil change, channel your inner Nike and just do it.
Treat it like putting gas in the car.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, that rings empty because most people, when that happens, aren't in a place. They have to get back to work. They got to pick up a kid. It's really busy. They're not near a Valvoline. Like it's not super real in some way. There's one thing I want to do before we close. So Dan Klein had this, like, I thought this is just a brilliant activity. So what's going to happen is, Grant, you're going to be up. So we'll go.
I'm getting excited.
Like, this is amazing. So Eater and I are each, Eater, you're just going to go, I'll go first, and then Eater's going to follow. And we're just going to say some random detail. And then Grant, your task is going to be to paint like a 30-second story that encompasses both of those details.
And okay, so I'm supposed to do this first. You don't want to give an
Oh,
example?
no, like we're not going to give an example, but I'm going to give a detail. Eater's going to give a detail. Either your detail should be like completely independent and unrelated of my detail, which makes Grant drawing a line between these two like going to be fun to watch him think on his toes. And
Okay.
And just to be clear with the context, am I like telling a story, like a bedtime story kind of thing in 30 seconds?
you can tell a bedtime story. You can just like give an example of where these two things would interact in the life. You can tell a joke. You can like really say any words that connect these two in a way that like makes sense to the human mind.
All right, I'm ready. Let's go. I've asked too many questions.
A broken record player on the night of a party.
A rare bone disease.
So we're starting this podcast and it's called Ben, Ben, and Blue, and we're not exactly sure of the direction it's going to go, but the one thing we know for sure is that we're going to have a vinyl episode at some point down the road. This is because fundamentally I'm copying Hello Internet and I'm not going to be ashamed about that fact. Now, naturally, when you have some kind of vinyl record, you're going to have a party to play that record, so we all get together. We get together to play this record, and unfortunately, it broke on the way. How did it break on the way? Well, the one person that we designated to carry it fell, and it was just a simple fall on the sidewalk. There wasn't anything tripping them. So they come, they're a little bit sad. They tell, this is Cam. This is like a mutual friend of ours. Cam comes, he tells us, hey, I broke the record. We're not going to be able to play this. And we're sitting there like, God, Cam, we're going to be like, we were going to have this party. We were all going to listen to the episode. It was going to be on vinyl. It was going to be great. And we're just giving him all kinds of crap about this. And we're like, and how the hell do you even trip just like walking around? Who taught you how to walk? And in that moment, for the first time in our long relationship, he confides to us the fact that he has this rare bone disease that makes it hard to stand and just hard to walk. And we all feel like jerks for yelling at him about falling when we realize that the life he leads is a lot harder than he makes it look.
That was amazing.
That was also good. I love the way this was what Dan Klein says. Like everyone stops and he's like, well, so like what kind of record player? Like, wait, did you say bone? Like that, like that's the exact wrong way to do it. It's just like take the mic and run with it and just go. So this was so funny. So oh my God. So you're in a room with 20 people and anyone can yell out a command and then everyone has to do that thing. And so the command was pretend like you're a robot in a room full of robots. And so like everyone in the room starts doing like
What I love there is that somehow you're going to act differently as a robot with the context of a room full of robots. Right? Like what do you do differently in behaving as a robot with the knowledge that
so the
everyone else
funniest
is?
thing, but literally two people, because I think it wasn't enunciated super well, turned to one of the robots and put their hand out and go, "Hi, I'm Robert." That was just too. I like could not believe it.
And did they run? Like they should have just run with it, right? Like yes,
100%. Like it should have then been two Roberts in a room full of otherwise robots. Like that should have then been the scene, right? Like, like oh my God. Should we wrap there? Do we want to do one more improv thing? Like, does Eater want to take a chance at looping in two details?
I can't top that.
Can't top that?
No.
Grant, you did. Yeah, that is a grand finale. That was absolutely the 4th of July fireworks grand finale. All right, what's up? Ben number 2 here to close things out of that random conversation. I'll just hit you with just a random tidbit of background as you can understand us. So Grant sends me an email 15 hours ago. I had no idea the guy's birthday was coming up. No idea. I don't know if I didn't check Facebook. I don't know if it's not listed. I'm not sure. But he says, my birthday snuck up on me without realizing it. The idea was thrown out to have a simple dinner, but he wanted to reverse the calorie flow and try to get a group together for something more childlike, playful, and active. And so the recommendation was to all meet up somewhere at Stanford, I don't know when, on Saturday, and do that to celebrate Grant's birthday. I think that's going to be really fun. I'm excited about that. The additional piece of background that you guys might not realize is, so we all met, Ben, Grant, and I met at Khan Academy. Ben had worked there for a long time and still does, and I was working remotely and got to know Ben and Grant a little bit by working remotely and visiting the office once in a while, but there's only so far you can get with in-person meetings once every 6 months and Google Hangouts. And then I moved out here to come to Stanford and actually, as a result of that, kind of take these Google Hangouts email work relationships and they start to turn into friendships. And that's very much happening in parallel with the podcast being created. That's happening probably it's caused by the podcast. It's probably an effect of the podcast. There's probably different ways you can think about it. But so that's been a cool experience. And what it made me think of is I had that analogy at the opener of my sister and the neighborhood girl putting on a dance performance for my parents and me and watching it. And what this realized, I sent Grant an email last night. I wonder if I can pull it up. But it was just like, this is a fun thing to work on together. The podcast is a fun thing to work on together. And maybe my favorite thing of doing it is just that Ben, Grant, and I have something to work on together. It would be less fun to dig holes, but it would still be relationship building and it'd still be fun. I think I joked about it, building tree houses in an email with Grant. But just working on things with other people fosters connection and is important. And I think that's just to tie it back, because we always go back to bloodletting, right, on this podcast, where it's the bloodletting hotline. And that's one of the most fundamental problems with a lecture. Like, school culture is really bad. You don't form relationships by sitting next to people trying to sponge up information. You grow relationships by trying to create stuff, by failing together, by giving each other feedback, by learning how people operate. And I don't know, that's so cool. I think maybe that's one of the most underrated reasons why life rewards action, because it just allows you to take action with people, and then you feel more connected to the people in your lives. And to channel my inner Brene Brown, perhaps the human connection is the only true thing we care about. I'm not sure, but random thoughts to close us out on a very random podcast. Again, would love to get any feedback you have on comparisons, what you liked and didn't like from both episode 3 and 4, as we 3 consider where to take this podcast in the future. Other things you can do, it feels weird to ask for money at the same time as asking for feedback, so value the feedback request way higher than the money request. But the Patreon is set up if you want to commit as little as $1 per episode. You'll get access to a couple of episodes of additional content that were fun to record, and I think will be just as fun to listen to. The rating us in iTunes, we hear, is a valuable thing for beginning podcasts. So if you do that, we would appreciate that. But more than anything, we value your feedback. More than anything, we value that you listen to it, because it was fun to produce. And so we hope you had a fun time listening. Goodbye for now. Hope to talk soon.